Thank you so much. I'm a huge fan of your work. Ranging from The Rock, Armageddon, and Jurassic World films. And I just want to get started with the Michael Bay films, if that works for you.
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. So, how did you come on board? Because The Rock came out in 19. It's been actually literally 27 years this summer, I think, if I'm not mistaken. How did you get on board on a Michael Bay film?
So I'll give you the shorter version, which is Michael Bay and I grew up together.
Oh, you did? Okay.
So he and my younger sister, who's 3 years younger than me, went to primary school, secondary school. They were friends all the way through high school, and so I knew Michael just because it was my sister and my sister's friends. And I'm 3 years older, so I went to USC Film School. I got out, and Michael always had a huge interest in movies, and he went to the Art Center College of Design, which is a really unique art school in Southern California that really is where almost all the car designers in the world come out of. It was basically financed originally by General Motors and Ford and Dodge, but they have a small film program. And when Michael was there, I think there were 10 students. It was Michael, Tarsim, and Larry Fong, who's also a cinematographer.
Yeah, of
And
course.
Art Center, because it was so small, you as a director there were required to find your own crew. And since Michael knew that I had gotten out of film school, I became his cinematographer, all of his student films. And then very quickly after Michael graduated from Art Center, he got hired as a music video director at a place called Propaganda Films, which was a kind of groundbreaking company back in the mid to late 80s with David Fincher and a couple of other directors. There were only 4 directors there at the time when Michael got signed. And I came along with him because I was the guy who shot all of his stuff. So we had a very busy couple of years shooting commercials. And I also shot for David Fincher at the same time. When Michael wasn't doing a job, I would do a job the next week with David Fincher. But we worked constantly. I mean, we were doing 35 music videos a year, right? So a music video would be, you scout the locations on Monday, you prep on Wednesday, you shoot. We used to shoot Saturdays and Sundays because the equipment rental was only one day on a weekend,
Right.
right? So it was all about putting it on the screen. And then we transitioned from commercials, from music videos to commercials. And in the meantime, my stock had risen a lot, and I went off and did a little film called Benny and June with another commercial director who I was working with at the time, and then came back and did The Rock with Michael. I was, the only choice he wanted. He wanted me to do, he did a movie before that called Bad Boys, but
Right.
I couldn't do it at the time because my dad was dying of cancer. So I decided to take the summer off and be with him. Otherwise, I would have, the first movie I would have done with Michael was Bad Boys, but I know he didn't have a great experience with his cinematographer on that movie. So when The Rock came up, I was his only choice. Now, I was I think I was 31 or 32 at the time, and I was a very hard sell to the studio. But Jerry Bruckheimer, God love him, stuck his neck out for me and said to the studio, well, look, you love this guy's work. 99% of his work, except for Bad Boys, this guy did. Give him a chance. So they gave me a chance, and that's how The Rock happened for me. Now, Michael and I were very much in tune in terms of photography and how what the style of that movie was going to be, and we knew we wanted to take all of the techniques that we had sort of honed doing music videos and commercials, and some of that was forced perspective miniatures. Remember, this is pre-CGI. So even doing a blue screen back then was a huge expense. So there's no blue screen in The Rock. There's no nothing, right? It's all in camera.
Yeah.
I mean, when Sean Connery has a glass of coffee sitting in the foreground, that mug is literally like 16 inches high, right? Because we wanted this kind of forced perspective. We did a lot of that. The quarter, that he spins on the table in the foreground was like this big. We knew we were very much students of old Hollywood and tricks, making hallways look longer because we could force the perspective. And we were very much into doing that, which really wasn't being done in Hollywood at that time. And we also knew that we wanted to take the audience on a ride and kind of break all the rules of action filmmaking, which we did. And I think that movie still holds up to this day.
It most certainly does. And you talked about propaganda films. I was speaking to, I think this was last year, some point, Vadim Perlman. I think he was in that group too. At least that's what he told me. Who went on directing House of Sand and Fog, and also Craig Wood, who worked with Gore Verbinski a lot. And Gore, I think Gore was also part of propaganda.
Gore was, yeah. So Gore used to be Michael's production manager. So Gore started out as a producer and then became a director. Gore was, I remember Gore. I mean, I remember working with Gore, but not in a creative capacity. But he's a fantastic guy. Vadim Perlman, that was a later group. I was with the Michael Bay, David Fincher group that moved into features.
Got it.
Like in the early 90s. And once we did that, I would only come back and do a music video for Madonna or somebody big. Music videos were no longer my livelihood. Feature films were. And obviously, after The Rock, my career got shot out of a cannon. I mean, I went and did this movie Conspiracy Theory with Richard Donner right after that, then came back and did Armageddon. And I was on a rocket ship to, a career that I never planned.
Right. No,
but
and
I still enjoy it to this day.
Absolutely. And The Rock, I'll tell you, there's very few films that I remember experiencing in the movie theater. So The Rock, I knew in 1993 that I wanted my career to be in films as a director. And The Rock gave me the significance of the editing and the music, like how important those two things are. And I still remember sitting in the movie theater feeling that dun 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 dun, that whole theme that Hans Zimmer did and Harry Gregson Williams. It was, and the cuts and the cinematography. I also spoke to Richard Francis, who actually, cut the film.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And he had cut Seven and The Road Warrior, and he's a great look. He's as much a part of the success of that movie as anyone else. And we were all in the right place at the right time. We were breaking rules that we knew we were breaking. I can remember there was a day where Michael and I were on Russian Hill in San Francisco getting ready to blow up this cable car. And we just kind of stood there in the middle of the street and said, Jesus, the two of us aren't even as old combined as Sean Connery. And the studio just gave us $80 million to make this movie. So we were kids. At the same time, I think we had some talent, right? I mean, I was pretty skilled as a cameraman in terms of understanding the technical aspects of it. I had a color dark room as a kid. So photography and going to the lab with printer lights and understanding what could be done was kind of in my wheelhouse, right? And again, it was, this was the era where you shot a close-up on a 17.5 with, Ed Harris right in the lens, but we shot the master from another room on 100. Now, the script supervisor was going crazy. She was like, you can't do this. And, you weren't going to tell Michael he can't do something. He had a vision and, that's what we did. And it was hard because San Francisco is a tough place to work, and working inside of the real Alcatraz. I mean, today you would have built those sets.
Yeah.
We shot all of Alcatraz is Alcatraz. We didn't build anything, right? Those are real cells, but prisons are not made to move around quickly. And so just getting the gear to where we needed it was a huge physical endeavor. I think everybody lost about 10 pounds for the 8 weeks we were on the rock. It was really physically grueling.
I bet. And, that's one of the things that I loved about The Rock was the actual proper, locations. Like there was nothing in there. I think the only thing that I thought at the time was kind of visual effects, which I still don't know if it is, when the F-16s or F-15s go underneath the Golden Gate Bridge.
So here's the deal. Most of that. So when we were prepping in San Francisco, they do this. I think it's the end of September because I think we started shooting in October. They have a thing called Fleet Week where they bring
Right.
an aircraft carrier into the Bay of San Francisco. And I
Ah,
heard about it and I said to the producers, get me a Airy 3 and I need a 600 millimeter telephoto lens. Now, the shot going under the Golden Gate Bridge, those are that's a helicopter flying over the Golden Gate Bridge. And then we shot miniatures of the F-16s, just, not on blue screen, but I forget where we shot them. We shot them at a place called Marineland, which is out sort of on the coast of LA, so we could have water underneath. That one shot is visual effects because you're not allowed to fly F-16s under the Golden Gate Bridge. But
yeah,
everything else you see of airplanes flying around San Francisco was me on the roof of Alcatraz with a 600 millimeter lens shooting footage that was provided by the United States military.
crazy. What
Yeah.
about that? What about that sequence when the missile is launched and the F-16 goes up in the air and it's like an shot from above with the explosion? What was that?
Again, that was a helicopter up high, right, shooting a plate of Alcatraz, and then a very large fireball that we shot in a parking lot with a camera on a construction crane about 200 feet in the air, looking straight down. So that was a composite.
Got it.
But again,
Now
remember, this was an era where compositing
I
was
know, I know.
it was a very expensive and
Yeah,
not a great the science today obviously is it's a lot simpler. It's
yeah,
probably in a library you wouldn't even have to shoot the element. But we hung a basket off a construction crane with a camera pointed straight down, didn't put anybody in it because we thought the heat from the fireball was going to be too much. And we literally, I don't know, 150 gallons of diesel fuel and some primer cord and blew this giant fireball up in the air.
yeah. And what makes your work with Michael Bay unique, and that you mentioned that, is the use of telephoto lens to get deeper shots, wider shots, and it just gives such a beautiful effect and also moves the story in such a delightful manner. What I wanted to ask you about, there are a couple of, when I think of The Rock, I think of the music, I think of the cuts, I think of a couple of scenes, one being, and I spoke to this about to Richard Francis as well, the shower scene. That for me was the most incredible scene in terms of editing, cinematography, music, emotion, acting, everything. Do you remember how that went about and how long it took you guys to film that?
I think we filmed it in, I think it was 2 days, and only because it took a long time to reset all of the walls with the tiles that were getting blown up. And we were really, people had to be careful, right? The camera crew was always under a furniture blanket with Lexan around them because there was just stuff flying everywhere. The idea was Michael likes to kind of point the camera. Look, Michael's got a great eye. So he will only point the camera in three directions. He always knows. You never have to worry with Michael on a day exterior which way you're going to look in the morning. You're going to look east, and then you're going to look south in the middle of the day, and then you're going to look west at the end of the day. He loves backlight. So that was a set that we built. That wasn't actually at Alcatraz because we had to be able to replace it.
Sure.
Um, and I remember I lit up that window so that when you looked at the window, it was sort of partially silhouette. But when you weren't looking at the window, the light from the window became a very nice wrapping kind of half light. And that gave us the ability to kind of, shoot quickly with a couple of cameras. And, but Michael's very specific. He's like, I want a 17.5 on a sandbag right here.
Yeah. No, he and that's one thing that I've noticed about. I mean, I didn't know that you guys. I knew about Michael Bay's music video background like about 15, 20 years ago. I don't know that background you had, and I know for a fact, like, and I'm assuming I already know the answer, but I'm just going to state it, is that because I have done, obviously not to the amount of music videos that you guys have done, but I've done a lot of events, live events, music videos, and documentaries where everything is happening on the fly. And I always find that gives you so much strength when you're in a controlled environment, because then you know exactly what you want, where you want it, how you want it, as opposed to, not saying it doesn't work for other directors, but I'm just saying if you have that kind of background experience, do you think that sort of helped you move a lot faster on
Yeah, without a doubt, to the point of which no one could keep up with us. And the thing is also, Michael and I coming out of music videos and commercials, if we were shooting day exterior and we saw that the light was great somewhere, we would just literally go, "Hey, we're going over here now." And people were like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Move this stuff over here, but put the 300 millimeter Nikkor on. Let's go." We were all about Michael. He has a great eye, and it was all about creating this kind of with the use of cross lighting, this kind of depth to the shots. Obviously, right, backlight and cross light create more dimension in a frame. And like you said, Michael he was a still photographer before he was a director in his teenage years. And you can see it in his work. I mean, not to say that obviously I don't contribute a lot, but I'm working with a guy who I know what the answer is going to be before I ask the question. And he's not afraid to take chances. He back then he certainly wasn't. We just let it fly. If it felt right, we shot it.
Yeah. And that's one other thing that you didn't do Pearl Harbor, did you?
I did.
Okay, you did. So, and I think that goes to a testament to your collaboration with him. Another type of shots that I see a lot in those three films, eye level, or a little bit, I'm not talking about the shots that coming out of the car, typical Michael Bay shot with the camera above,
Yeah.
but just like in Pearl Harbor, the Pearl Harbor film, no offense to anyone, I wasn't a fan of it. I was very excited about it, but that trailer, those scenes of kids playing baseball and the pitching and the plane flies by, I mean, the position of the camera and the framing was just so spot on, and it gave you everything that was happening in such a beautiful way. And I just want to let you know that's what I think connects with audiences at such a deep level, among with other things too. But people love that, and they don't realize they love that. I genuinely admire that kind of stuff every time I see stuff from Michael Bay.
Well, I think some of that, the ability to tell a story without dialogue, I think for both Michael and I came out of commercials where you've got 30 seconds to tell this story, right? And we did a lot of really great commercials with really nice images that kind of tell you everything you need. And then Michael's also got a great sense of humor. So his comedy commercials, like the milk stuff that I did with him, were legendary. And you can see it in Bad Boys. He's got a great sense of humor. But he knows how to stack a frame, right? And you talk about the baseball shot. So we were prepping Pearl Harbor. We're in Hawaii. We've got all the airplanes there. They're flying the airplanes every day just to make sure they're all airworthy, right?
Yeah.
I said to Michael, we've got all the cameras here. And right in the middle of Pearl Harbor, Ford Island, is a baseball field. It's really there. And I'm watching this baseball field every day, and I'm watching these airplanes fly around. I said to Michael, why don't we get a bunch of kids and we'll do a little league game, and I'll just have the planes fly by and we can use it in the movie. And he was like, that's a great idea. So, you set up 60 feet of dolly track and you get the pilots to come in as they're literally just trying to make sure that all the engines work right and all the control surfaces are good. They're taking them up every day for an hour just to double check the planes. And I said, let's just get them to fly the zeros and the vowels and the Kates by. And then later we had a close-up of the guy telling the kids to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. What was the most challenging thing on The Rock, cinematography wise, lighting wise?
The most challenge, it was the tunnels. The tunnels, and again, this is where as a young cameraman, I was a little bit green. Had I had more experience, I would have asked the production designer to give me more little portholes to shine light through. So when I went to do The Rock, I was friendly with a cinematographer named John Alonzo who had done Chinatown. And I was telling him about how I was going to be working at these very low light levels. So, as you double the amount of light, you gain a stop, right? But the
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
between, so we were working in those tunnels. So it was very difficult on the focus pullers because we had very shallow depth of field. We were shooting film, not digital, because that didn't exist back then. So you didn't know if it was in focus until you saw dailies the next day. And I also knew that the difference between 3-foot candles and 5-foot candles was a stop of light. So John Alonzo had a special light meter made, and he actually gave it to me to use on the rock. And it only measured from 0-foot candles to 10, because that was the most amount of light I could get in there. And 10-foot candles at ISO 320 was like a third open 2.8, which I could never
yeah,
get to. So everything in there was challenging to work in the water, because we all stood in waders for 12 hours a day in the water. And it was very difficult to get the light levels to create any kind of depth of field in there. Now, for the most part, we shot on pretty wide lenses in there, which helped. But if I had done this, if you were saying, how would I do it today? I would have had little pieces of brick that would have hidden where the hole is, but I could have, again, bounced another light off the water.
yeah,
So I was really challenged to try to get any light in there. Once the explosions started to happen, I could put fire bars around. But in the beginning, it was hard. It was hard to get enough light in there to see people's faces. And obviously, you're paying Sean Connery a lot of money. You want to see his face. You're paying Nick Cage a lot of money. You want to see their faces. And the thing is, those two guys were so good together. I mean, that's why the movie's so fun.
yeah. The chemistry.
They were both Sean hated making the movie. He was really difficult until Jerry Bruckheimer showed him like a sizzle reel of about 8 weeks of footage that we had done. And Sean saw it, and we all saw it. Richard cut it together. We were in a
Yeah, he
screening room
talked
with
about that. Yeah,
me and Sean and Jerry Bruckheimer and Michael and Richard, and you could see Sean's eyes just light up. And he realized, okay, I don't like the way this kid works because he's just screaming and yelling and we don't know what's next. And Sean's very much by the books, this is
yeah,
my mark. I do this. And Mike would be like, I don't care, run over there, because he'd see
yeah.
the sunball. But once Sean saw the sizzle reel, he was all in, right? Then it was like, okay, whatever you want me to do.
Right. And back then, I mean, now there's such fast lenses, right? Like 1.8. I've even worked with a lens, which was 0.95. Back then, was there anything under 2.8?
There was. So we were using Panavision Primo lenses. They were 2-stop lenses, or they said they were 2-stop lenses. I really think they were about a 2.5, even though they said they go to a 2. I never believed it. But again, when you have two people in the frame and they're standing next to each other and you're wide open, you're having to make choices about where do I play the focus, right? And
Yeah,
this was a movie in which I wanted to, a lot of times you wanted to carry both of their faces because how they interacted. So that was the real challenge in the tunnel was, there was a move in digital cinema to shoot everything wide open, right? Everything on the Leicas at a 1.4, but that's one eye in focus and the other eye out of focus. I don't really like that style of cinematography. I think it works if you're going to rack focus from the barrel of the gun to Ed Harris's face, where you want that kind of deep rack and everything goes from very small focus in the foreground to suddenly Ed's face in the background and the gun disappears. But as a style of shooting, it's not my favorite way to go. I don't shoot day exteriors at less than a 5.6 because the human experience when you go outside is you carry a certain amount of depth of field in your own vision because of how bright it is, and your pupils become, their lens irises, they get smaller.
yeah. No,
I mean,
so true.
I do use exposure and depth of field for storytelling reasons, but I don't. But I'm also always thinking of what is the audience experiencing.
It's so funny you mentioned that. So I wear, prescription glasses, and I've sort of kind of stayed away from sunglasses because what's the, how am I going to change this? You have those clip-ons.
Right.
And now I just got a new pair and it came with these like magnetic clip-ons. And it's great. Like when I'm walking outside, like, or running, like it's great that this light's not hitting me. But when I take them off, I feel like I'm in my natural world. It's so important. It's just like ND filters, right? Like sunglasses are like an ND
Right.
filters. And it's so important. You're so right to have that kind of a feel, because audiences, I mean, I'm in film. I look at these things, but even, ordinary film goer, they may not know the technical stuff, but they can pick up on these things at a very subconscious or even conscious level.
100%. 100%. So, I did a picture about, oh man, 7 years ago called The Highwaymen for Netflix, about the two Texas Rangers that killed Bonnie and Clyde. And it's a really good movie. And to me, it was a Western, right? These guys in the 30s chasing Bonnie and Clyde across Oklahoma, Texas, and Louisiana, and ultimately killing them outside of Shreveport, which is where they were killed. And I said to the director, and everybody was saying, you can't shoot a deep stop on digital cameras because it looks like video. And I went to Dan Sasaki, the lens designer at Panavision, and I said, look, think of this movie as The Searchers, right? John Ford, when he was out in Monument Valley, shot with a lot of depth, right, to see all of Monument Valley. And I said, I am out in the middle of Texas where the horizon goes on forever. I don't want to shoot this movie where 4 feet behind Kevin Costner, the background falls away. I want to feel the desolation of where we are. So he helped me design a set of lenses that looked really good on digital cameras, stopped down to an 8 or even an 11, because I felt like that was the right language for that movie, and that was how we did The Rock as well. I mean, sometimes we shot, close to wide open, but most of the time we didn't. We shot at a 4 or a 5.6 because we were in San Francisco and you wanted to see the Palace of Fine Arts. It didn't want to be a blurry background. Michael wanted to put you in the environment.
Right. And that's what, so you shot Highwaymen. Is it Highwaymen, is it called, you said?
Yeah.
Was that on Red?
That was on the DXL, which was a Panavision version of a Red camera.
So for me, and I'm sure maybe for you too, is that when I look at, I was watching the series with my wife. We just started this Apple series called Silo. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
It's just came out. It's kind of like the COVID kind of a setup, but it's in distant future where everybody's kind of stuck in one building and you're not allowed to go out. And I get what the tone was they were trying to do. Like it was like just like bland colors, dark shots. And that to me somehow doesn't click the same way. I'm all good for dark shots, like the way you did The Rock, right? Or other, like David Fincher has done stuff in his films like Seven. But there's just something about digital that to me doesn't register, even though I shoot digital. I mean, I can't afford film, right? It's so expensive.
Well, and no one can these days because there's, at least in America, there's only one lab. I mean, look, Jurassic World was film. I still think that film is prettier and better. The fact that the photo sites are in a different spot on every frame of film, there's no moire in film. There's only moire in digital, right? Digital. I also find that there's a respect for the process when you're shooting film that seems to have gone away when you shoot digital. That said, there's no question that if you're shooting a gritty movie in the streets of New York at night, the Sony Venice 2 would be the camera of choice because you could turn the ISO to the high gain position of 3200, but rate the camera at 16 so you don't get any noise and you've got an extra stop or two of exposure, which means that street lights are suddenly a light source. I mean, in Pearl Harbor, every night exterior, if it was supposed to be Honolulu downtown, I rigged 2K bulbs in every street light. Nowadays, producers aren't going to give you a week or deal with the city to get into their lights, to rewire them and all that. But that's what we needed to do back in the film day when we were shooting anamorphic film, where I never shot more wide open than a 4 because the lenses lost their contrast. If you went to a 2.8, the lenses didn't look sharp anymore because of the chromatic aberration of the front element, which is curved. So there were certain tricks to the trade, but it meant that you were going to go out and you were going to light your night exteriors, really light them. The good thing about that was if something was in the background and you didn't want to see it, you just didn't have to light it, because you were building up the light levels to such a level that the background would fall away. So if there was something that wasn't the right period for our movie, if I didn't put any light on it, you wouldn't notice it. Now the problem is you can't control anything, right? It's all, you go out on the streets and whether you like it or not, there's light everywhere because these cameras see in the dark.
Yeah. And I think that's what's changed drastically when it comes to anything, any stage in filmmaking. But I'm going to talk about, camera and post. Is like, I remember when I shot my first short, it was on a 16 millimeter, and I had no freaking clue what I filmed because you couldn't see it.
Right.
And the first two films that I did, one was overexposed, one was underexposed, and then I obviously learned my way through it. And the same, I think everybody's become too safe now. People are not willing to take chances and risks and be bold about things. And I genuinely feel that's why 90s was probably one of the best era of filmmaking. Like, it was just bold decision making and risk taking.
It was bold decision making. It was some really great advances by Kodak, and also the lighting manufacturers were coming up with new lights, and it was a young group of cinematographers, kind of like how they were in the 70s. I mean, we used to consider ourselves like Vilmos and Laszlo, where we were pushing the boundaries. Look, film fails with a certain elegance, right? All you have to do is look at McCabe and Mrs. Miller, where Vilmos every night in his hotel room pre-fogged the film by loading the mag up, punching a hole so he knew where to center it, and then exposing a white card at a 16 stop to build up a layer of fog. And then, the windows were blown out, but when you blow out film, it creates this kind of elegant look. Digital does not fail with the same elegance that film fails with.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems. I'm trying to master it, and I still carry a light meter, and I still work the same way. And somebody will say to me, you're clipping there, or you've got no definition. And I would say to them, well, I don't want any definition there. Is it a problem? They're like, no, it's not a problem. I'm just letting you know. It's like, okay, great. Here's how we're going to shoot it. I don't need any definition out of that window. I want that window to be blown out. I want it to be white.
Yeah.
But, look, it's a lot easier to shoot with a digital camera than it is with a film camera. It just is.
But I agree with you. Look, I'm part of the problem myself too. But I also feel, and I've been guilty of this, and I've sort of tried to figure a way around that, is that when you're doing digital, in the back of your mind, you can always do retakes, right? And sometimes it slows down the process too, I feel. But if you can get a hang of it, and you don't push yourself to that edge that, okay, I can do another 10 takes because the digital is not costing me anything, then you lose that sense of on the moment spot decisions kind of thing.
I agree with you. And I mean, but it's still, and by the way, it does cost, right? I mean, digital's not free. Somebody's got to transcode all the footage.
Yeah.
But digital, so it used to be that, you knew that the monitor, the video assist coming out of a film camera was like an impressionist painting, right? And they were relying on the cinematographer to make sure that everything looked right. Nowadays, everybody's got a really good monitor, and now everybody's a cinematographer or a colorist. And, certainly the respect for the job has changed. Now, granted, I only work with the directors that I like to work with, and they trust me and they respect my work, and they don't really ever say, like, is it going to be this dark, or is it going to, they hire me for what I do. But certainly the position of being a cinematographer in terms of on-set scrutiny has gotten exponentially bigger.
Yeah. Right. And Armageddon, like you said, you were a natural selection by Michael
Right.
to work on Armageddon. What was that experience like?
That was an incredible. I mean, first of all, when you get to spend as much time as I did at NASA, so I had 9 months of prep on that movie. That's an incredible amount of prep. Now we
Wow.
shot for 140 days, so it was a very long movie, but it required me going to the Kennedy Space Center many times. We went out there with Michael to scout it, to figure out where we wanted to put the cameras for the launch. And the original launch that we did, the day launch, was never supposed to be in the movie. That was just a trial run for the night launch, because they only do one, they were doing one night launch a year. And Michael wanted to photograph the night launch. And I had suggested that we better do a day launch just to make sure it all works. But we picked our camera spots. We had 17 cameras. And then it was a whole case of, okay, so now we have to figure out how the NASA computer can turn on the camera. So we had electronics guys make boxes. I would take the box and a camera to NASA. They would do a simulated countdown and we would see if it worked. If it didn't work, we'd go back and try to figure out why the trigger didn't work. And then we did things like, so when they fuel the main rocket booster, you cannot be within 2 miles of the orbiter.
Mm.
The cameras have to be placed before that. Now, the launch can be postponed for up to 24 hours. So the question was, okay, so we took all the cameras, we took them out into the parking lot of Panavision, we plugged them in, and we left them there for 3 days, and we came back and we turned them on to see if they would actually run, or would the batteries have drained out. Of course, the batteries were dead. This is pre-lithium ion batteries. Camera
Right.
batteries were lead acid batteries. So we had Panavision build us super big batteries. Then the question came down to, oh, hell, we're in Florida. There's so much humidity and temperature change. Are the lenses going to fog up? So then it was a case of, okay, so let's get 12-volt marine batteries and wrap the lenses in recreational vehicle 12-volt light bulbs, sort of like your rear window defroster, to keep the lenses warm so that they wouldn't fog up. Because the last thing you want to find out is your launch is no good because your lens has fogged because of the humidity. So it was weeks and weeks and weeks of problem solving. And then getting to actually shoot the launches was one of the highlights of my life. I mean, to be standing on top of the vehicle assembly building, filming, tilting with a orbiter as it goes up was just beyond, I can't tell you. I mean, the NASA people were so amazing. They were just the greatest people I've ever met. They loved what they did. We gave them copies of every shot that we did for their library, and they'd never seen 35 millimeter anamorphic film running at 120 frames a second of, the launch. So they once we turned over our day launch to them, I had basically access to every area of NASA, to the point at which when I left, they gave me a tile off of one of the space shuttles.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, so that was great. And then it was a very long, hard movie. We went out to the Badlands of South Dakota to shoot the big wide shots of the asteroid, and we
Yeah.
had a small RV version, a remote control version of the Armadillo that we would drive around in the background. So that was a model, a miniature. All of the stuff of the Freedom and Independence were miniatures. When I say miniatures, they were like 10 feet long, but they were shot by a model unit in Marina Del Rey. So it was all, that's how we did it all. We tried to do it all in camera.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm kind of going all over the place, but one thing I love about Michael Bay films, and I mean, in tying to Armageddon and even Pearl Harbor and The Rock, is the way he portrays, because he has a obviously strong relationship with the military, NASA and all that. The way he portrays patriotism and the way he portrays, I mean, I come from a military family, so whenever hearing the music, the style, the slow motion shots, and just that salute, it is such, I mean, he just nails it. He
Well, it's
literally,
why we get all that access, right? I mean, how do you get 30 vintage airplanes from the west coast of the United States to Hawaii? a P-40 cannot fly to Hawaii, right? It can only fly for 3 hours and it can't refuel in the air. You make a phone call, you call your friends at the Navy, and they load all the airplanes onto an aircraft carrier, and they basically are a taxi service for Jerry and Michael. I mean, we all stood there in Hawaii as the John C. Stennis came into port with all the vintage airplanes, P-40s, B-25s, and the Japanese Zeros, Vals, and Kates, all on the flight deck. All the F-18s, all the F-14s, or whatever the Navy version, they were all underneath. All the old vintage planes were lined up. I mean, you need those kind of friends to make these kind of movies. And obviously, Michael's movies are a love letter to sort of America, you know?
It is. 100%. I mean, his even most recent movie, which I don't think you were part of, Ambulance. Like,
No, I haven't done a movie with Michael after Pearl Harbor.
okay.
I mean, I basically, where Michael and I sort of went different directions was I kind of felt like we were making the same movie over and over again.
Yeah.
And I was now getting offers in. I did Seabiscuit, which I got an Academy Award nomination for.
Which is a great film, by the way. Great work.
Thank you. And Michael's a difficult director. He's very impatient. He's a screamer and a yeller, but he doesn't take it home. I mean, he'll at the end of the day go, "Sorry, I yelled at you," but it's a lot of stress. And I remember saying to Michael, you know, first of all, you keep telling me we're going to do something different, but we always fall back into what works, which I get. But I said, you know, the yelling and the screaming is just becoming too much for me. I go work with other directors that are so happy that I'm there. They would never yell and scream. So basically we still were doing commercials together, but I just said, look, find somebody else to do Transformers or The Island or whatever. Because I knew that basically those were going to be another version of my kind of cinematography, but not done by me.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of those movies, Transformers is very good. And it was done by Mitch Amundsen, who was the operator on Pearl Harbor and Armageddon, he was worked with me and Michael all the way through our commercial and music video life. So Mitch was well experienced to step in and know what he was getting, you know, and Michael felt comfortable with him.
Yeah, and I think one thing that his most recent movie that came out, Ambulance, which for me was probably one of his closer to early films like The Rock and Armageddon in terms of motion. But one thing I couldn't stand in the movie when I was watching the movie theater, it was there were certain great shots of that FPV drone that they had going underneath the police car.
It was too much because I saw parts of it.
Way too much. I was like so distracted in the beginning of this film. Like, what the hell is going on? It was overdone so much.
Yeah, no, he fell in love with those drone guys.
Yeah, I think it was a bunch of kids, right? Like young kids.
Yeah, but they race them and they can really fly. And the reality is, just because you can doesn't mean that you should.
Good. Yeah.
You know?
Agreed.
And I think the thing that's fun about like Colin Trevorrow, working with him on Jurassic, is he felt this duty to the franchise and to Steven. So we shot those movies in a very classic way, right? Now, just so you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark is Michael's favorite movie in the world. Yeah. And, you know, that to him, that's the best action movie ever made, and it probably is, right? It's a pretty flawless movie. And Colin, you know, was very much loves that movie and loves loved Jurassic Park and all that. So we were trying to create a new version of the Jurassic franchise. And I think Jurassic World is a really fun movie, but we shot it in a very kind of classic Spielberg way where it's not overcutty. So Steven is the greatest master shot director of all time, right? What starts as a master ends up as an over, turns around, becomes a close-up of somebody, and there's very few cuts in his scenes. Yes. He really knows how to move the camera around in a way that tells the story. And Colin was very much a student of that. So we really worked to try to create that same kind of feel, as opposed to cut. Now, there's obviously cuts in the movie, but we really took time and care in blocking our masters so they weren't just a wide shot of everybody in the room.
Yeah,
They constantly evolved into something else.
and that's so evident in Jurassic World because I became a filmmaker because of Jurassic Park. Like that movie turned my life upside down.
Right.
And Jurassic World, the way it was done was, I mean, exactly what you just said. It was such, I mean, there was a lot of similarities with Jurassic Park. It had to be because it's kind of like,
Right.
you know, which is fine. I still dug it. Like I still enjoyed it, but it was just so true to the Jurassic. I think he was even better than the second and third Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
Like I
which I
was,
don't think are very good.
yeah,
I
no,
mean,
they're not.
no disrespect to Steven, because I have nothing but
No,
admiration for him as a filmmaker, but
yeah,
I thought we did a really good job. And I thought it was a really fun, solid script. We had Chris Pratt. Guardians had not come out yet, but you just knew from the moment you met him, he was on the verge of stardom. I had known Bryce Dallas Howard since she was 14 because I did a movie with her father. So
yeah,
she would come to the set. So that was the relationships there were easy for me. And then it was just about, I would say to Colin many times, we can put a B camera over here if you want. He's like, I'm never going to use it. It's the A camera on the Technocrane. We follow the kids. We do this. Then we have a shot over their shoulder. We see the waterfall. That's all I need. It's like, okay, I get it. I'm just saying I could give you a profile if you want it. He's like, nope, I don't want it and I won't use it. And that was because, he was very much wanting to stay within the style of what Steven does. And
yeah.
I think he did a very good job.
No, he did, and you know, talking about the coverage, one of the things that I love about Spielberg's work, like you said, is that there's a shot that always again comes to my mind, Minority Report, when Colin Farrell's character pushes Tom Cruise character in the elevator when he's, you know, they discover when Tom Cruise finds out that he's gonna commit a murder, and that
Right.
entire scene is like one take, but the way the camera moves, it feels like he did like four cuts, but he doesn't. That's what's
Right.
so crazy about it. And I felt that in Jurassic World so much. And you know, I absolutely I wasn't fan, I'll be very honest, I wasn't fan of the second film at all, Jurassic World's the second part.
No, I wasn't a fan of it, and I'm not even a huge fan of the third one that
Neither
I
am I.
that I did. And I did it. And the thing is that, look, success, people deal with success in different ways.
Yeah.
And Colin is a very smart guy. But my comment to him was, why does everybody feel like they have to world build? I said, the first movie was so much fun. It was a ride. It was a simple setup, kind of
Yeah.
like The Rock is a simple setup. And I said, now we're like world building. And I said, all of this kind of like this biosyn is all stuff we've been hearing for years. Jeff Goldblum gives a speech, and it's like, God, I think I heard Linus Pauling give that same speech when I was when I was in university in the late 70s. It's like, what I kept saying to him, this movie doesn't seem like it's going to be fun like the first one was. And of course, it's like, no, 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 you don't understand. This is what we're doing. It's like, okay, fine. I trust you. You're a smart guy. You're a smart filmmaker. But I don't think it had the same fun, because the setup of
No.
the first one was like, okay, the ant is in charge of the kids. The dinosaur escapes. The kids are on their own. Now we got to go get them. And it's a chase movie, and the
Well,
kids survive on their wiles.
what happens with every film, right? Like when you make the first one, not knowing it's going to be a hit, you're limited. You're limited with your resources, you're limited with ideas, you're constrained. But when you become, you know, you have to top the first one. So you add, especially the Dominion film. My biggest problem with that film was way too many characters. I couldn't even keep track of what was each character's arc. I mean, there was that Asian lady
So
character.
with all, so here's what I will say. So I've seen there's different versions of the movie. Obviously, they're
Okay,
the one. So
sure.
there's three big story arcs. Hang on, I'm going to close the window because the leaf blower is going.
No problem.
So there's generally a mandate on summer movies that they can only run about 2 hours and 18 minutes, right? So they can get X
Mhm.
amount of exhibitions in a day.
Right.
With the three story arcs, the original version, Colin's version, which I think is It's a long movie, and you got to sit for almost 3 hours. But the 3 hour version of Jurassic World Dominion, those story arcs actually, you watch them build and they develop and they pay off. When you have to take 40 minutes out of a movie, that stuff gets truncated and it doesn't work. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
Ultimately the movie it was too long. They cut it down, and in the process, it didn't play. Look, the 4 hour version of Heaven's Gate is kind of an interesting movie. Now it means you're going to sit for half a day and watch this movie, but it's way better than the 2 hour version.
Yeah. Well, similar thing happened to Thin Red Line with Terrence Malick.
Yes.
I mean, it was like a 6 hour film, and I remember when I watched it, George Clooney, who was like a rising star at the time, he only had like a 2 minute scene, I think, because they cut so much of his part out.
Right.
And bunch of other stars. And listen, I mean, I get it. Like with Dominion, it was still better than the second one, but I assumed, I know there's an extended cut on DVD, which I think is 2 hours and 40 minutes, but I think you're saying
that's probably Colin's version.
Okay.
Which
I
is it's a better version of the movie, unless you're a shareholder in Comcast Universal, right?
Yeah.
Because remember, ultimately it's all about the bottom line.
I know, I get it. It's a business. Everybody's making money. I mean, everybody's got to get jobs, right? So I totally understand that.
Give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
No problem.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's all right. Yeah, so what was some of the biggest challenges on the Jurassic World 1 and Jurassic World 3 while filming?
So Jurassic World 1, the biggest challenges were literally just, it was my second movie in Hawaii. Hawaii is a difficult place to film because the weather changes so quickly, because you're on an island, you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Other than that, we actually finished that movie, I think, 2 days ahead of schedule. Jurassic 3 was obviously COVID, right? So we had started filming. We were filming in northern British Columbia in early March. We shot for 8 or 10 days up in the snow. And then we came back to London. We sort of prepped for a week to start the 75 days of filming in England. And we started filming our first week. And I don't even know if the scenes that we filmed are in the movie, but I know they're in Colin's version. And then on a Friday night at midnight, they said, we're shut down, because COVID was, went from being something abstract to suddenly, oh, this is real. So we got on an airplane and flew back to America. That was March 16th or 17th, right?
Yeah.
But I went back to England in the middle of June. We were the first movie to start back up. And no one really understood transmission or what the hell was going on. And at this time, 40,000 people a week were dying in London. I mean, it was scary. I was sort of like, do I really want to do this? And of course, my loyalty to the project and to the producers was, yeah, I'll do it. So COVID was the hardest part about making Jurassic 3 by far. Everything else was standard filmmaking. I mean, it was great to have all the animatronic dinosaurs. I mean, there's almost no CG dinosaurs in the movie, right? Everything is puppeteered. And that was just a joy. It's tedious and slow and they break, but you've got the time and the money to absorb that. In other words, if we couldn't finish a scene on Tuesday because the dinosaur broke, we knew we could come back on Wednesday. We weren't like up against it, right? We had a certain amount of flexibility also because it was COVID and no one was going to say you're a day behind.
Yeah. Right. And, when you're on a film, whether it's Jurassic or, Michael Bay films or anything else, how and I know the director is always like interacting with the cast and making sure the performances are kind of coming out, and you're working with your crew. But how much has there been any kind of involvement, working with actors on your part aside from schmoozing and socializing offset?
Well, I always talk to them about, hey, you could, when we rehearse, I'm always like, you can do whatever you want, but when we come back from the rehearsal and I've lit it, I need you to hit your marks. We've lost the skill with the younger actors have lost the skills that the older actors had, which is knowing how to hit marks without making it look like they're hitting marks, right? Sean Connery never missed a mark in his life on The Rock. I mean, it was so ingrained in him, especially back in the day when, you had brute arcs and the film was ASA 20. If you were out of your light, you were going to be dark, right? You weren't going to have a nice close up. So, but, I'll talk to the actors about, I think this, or can you slow that down? We're on a techno crane. When you get up to start the run, let us get up to speed before you really, give me 100%. But I would never say to Chris Pratt, hey, I think you were a little big on that one. Why don't you try bringing it down? That's a director work.
Yeah. And do you think it's probably because we live in such a fast-paced society now where everything is like, going faster than anything else, and people are like, when I say people, I mean like actors, when they're not young actors, when they're not meeting their mark. Do you feel it has anything to do with the way the society has become?
I just think it's the fact that they're not being trained in the way that they were. I think that it was a lot harder. There's a lot more production going on in the last 3 years than there ever has been. So a lot of people are getting their opportunities, which is a great thing. But a lot of them don't have the technical background that the great actors of the 60s and 70s and 80s had, So I did a movie with Donald Sutherland, Donald Sutherland, he's going to hit his mark every time because he doesn't think about it. It's just, he's been trained to do that, right? It's second nature to him. If and obviously when you're shooting over the shoulder shots, that's where things, if you lean too much one way or the other, you can block the shot and you got to go again. The more experienced actors understand, oh, you're over my left shoulder. I'll put my weight on my right foot. I'm not going to, and I don't have to say anything. Sometimes with younger actors, you bring them back to the monitor and you go, look, when you do this, if you do it this way, this is the problem. We have to go again. Because it's a technical medium, right? It's not theater. It's very much about every shot has its specific requirements. And if everybody does their thing as a team, then you get the best results. The shot's going to be in focus. The dolly is going to land right when the actor stops. Whatever the criteria is for that shot.
Right. And John, how big is your cinematography crew? Obviously, it varies probably depending on the budget of the film, but average, like, you work with the same group of people, like whether it's.
I used to work with the same group of people, but now that I've been spending, I have a crew that I work with in the UK that is the way the camera department breaks down is I'm the director of photography. If we have one camera, then I have a camera operator, I have a focus puller, and I have a second assistant, and we have a loader, whether that's film or digital. If we have two cameras, then you just double that. So generally speaking, on most movies I do, and especially during COVID, we always had two cameras, even if we were going to shoot one, just because somebody might test positive and you wanted to keep everybody within the testing cycle. So it was a way of like having players on the bench in the Premier League, right? I mean, it was just a way you paid guys and you hoped that they didn't have to work, but if they did, they were there and they were within the COVID protocol, whatever the rules were at whatever given time. As of today, there is no more COVID. So there's no more COVID protocol.
Yeah.
So, a camera crew would be 9 people. And then, between the grip and electric department, it's probably another 16 people. So that's 26, 27 people make up my team on a big movie.
Yeah, that's a pretty good size. I
It's a good
not
size.
Yeah, not to take away from anybody in any team, whether it's your team or any team. Like the camera operator, all these people have important jobs, but I always find one profession in the camera department that doesn't get talked about much is focus puller,
It's
right?
the hardest job on the set.
It is. I mean, everything is dependent on that, right? And
It's
I wish there was some sort of category at the academy
it's
because
the hardest job on the set. The day's work is in your hand right here. It is by far the most, oh, my job can be stressful, but every single shot is stressful for a focus puller, and including making sure the equipment's properly maintained. I mean, on the last movie, we were out and I kept looking at I was, looking at the A camera. I was like, something's wrong. These lenses aren't coming up the way they should. And of course, we took the lens off, put the camera on a collimator, and realized the back focus was off. We couldn't shim it on set, but we sent it back to the rental house. So the first assistant has to have a wide range of skills to understand how all this equipment works as well. Or, hey, the iris on this lens doesn't feel right anymore. Let's send it back to get it serviced. It's just not only pulling focus, but it's understanding how every piece of equipment on that camera truck works. It's a really hard job.
yeah. No, I bet. I mean, I can do a lot of things on set, if I have to, but focus pulling is, it's more sometimes I realized that when I was doing live events, that obviously, you don't have a budget for focus puller, you're just focus puller yourself.
Right.
And it just teaches you so much about the appreciation of, making sure everything stays in focus, because in events, things are moving. It's not like, everybody's locked on their spot and you're not
Well, and the
safe.
other thing is that there are some focus pullers are better storytellers than others. So, you have certain focus pullers when the director says, hey, I want you to rack from here to here. And some just have the right nuance, which is, I'm not going to do a hard, fast rack. I'm not going to
Yeah.
do a slow rack, and that's storytelling, right? And obviously Spielberg and Janusz and Bob Smathers or whoever is pulling focus, they're really in tune to that, which is, hey, we're going to do a slow roll here, because that is part of the language of storytelling visually. And
Yeah.
it is certainly not appreciated by producers, that's for sure, in terms of salaries, because those guys should be making more money than they make.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so true. And one of the films that you worked on, which came around the same time as Truman Show did, and EDtv.
Which to me, so the issue with EDtv was it was 10 years ahead of its time, right?
Way ahead.
Right. So I love EDtv. I think it's a really interesting movie. Technically, it was incredibly challenging because we were shooting live video and film at the same time and putting the live video on monitors and trying to keep the frame delay as short as possible. So I think we literally, the video came out of the beta cam, went into a truck, got converted to 24 frames, went back out into a monitor. And I think we were only one frame behind, which in its day was a huge technical achievement that Matt Morrissey, our sort of video engineer, was able to help craft. And the movie just did not spark with an audience back in its day. But all you have to do is turn on TV and it's the Real Housewives of New Jersey. Hell,
Yeah.
that's what EDtv was. We were doing it. When we made that movie, MTV had some show where they had all these cameras in a house and they put the young kids in it. That was the only reality show.
I
And
think I know
I
which
think
one
we
you're
were,
talking about. Yeah, I think I know what you're
I
talking
can't
about.
remember the name of it, but we were just ahead of our time. Because I think the movie made very, very interesting social statements, and it's a really fun, good movie. But we were just 10 years too early.
Well, I mean, even if you look at, forget about, reality TV, if you look at the arc of Matthew McConaughey's character, how he wanted all that stuff, and then later, how it affected him mentally. I mean, that's social media for you now. Like when you
Exactly.
so much of it, it has such a toll on you. Think fame and being in front of the people in the world is going to make you feel better about yourself, but over time it doesn't.
I would never trade places with a famous actor for all the money in the world.
Yeah,
The loss of anonymity would be just crushing. And in today's world, where everybody's basically got a movie camera on their phone,
I
you
know.
know, you're screwed.
It's
Look, the film business was very insular. I certainly witnessed lots of bad behavior by movie stars on set who had tantrums or whatever, but it never left the set. Those stories never got out because if they did, your career was over, right?
yeah,
So you were like, okay, so and so's Julia Roberts is having a bad day today. We're all allowed to have bad days. I have bad days.
of course.
Nowadays, forget it. You're screwed.
Well, I mean, it happened with Tom Cruise when his audio got leaked.
Yeah,
During the COVID, and
yeah.
it is scary. And one thing I don't know who I was having this discussion with. Uh, People, let's say celebrities, like when I say celebrities, let's say actors and actresses like caliber of Julia Roberts, Denzel Washington, George Clooney. They can't go to a gas station to fill up gas without
They
seeing
cannot.
people. And that's something that me and maybe even yourself, we probably take it as a great, for granted,
No,
but that's
no,
a huge
nobody knows
deal.
who I am,
Yeah.
which is great. I mean, I get to do my job and no one knows who I am, yet I get to entertain, you know, a billion people over the course of my career. And I must say, it's lovely. It's a great privilege to get to do what I do. Um, I still enjoy showing up every day on set. Um, I certainly prefer, and what made Jurassic 1 and 3 a lot of fun, and 3 more fun in some respects than 1, was the fact that it was all in front of the camera.
Mhm.
All the dinosaurs were being puppeteered. I just finished a movie with Jennifer Lopez, and she's lovely, but so much of it is foreground set and a green screen background.
Mhm.
And I don't, I kind of know what the background is because I have to inform how I'm supposed to light the foreground. Yet that background is in someone else's hands to create later. And that's a very difficult way to work as a cinematographer versus walking outside and going, wow, I think it's going to be cloudy today. We thought we were going to shoot this in the sun. How do we embrace this? Do we try to overpower the clouds by overlighting it with hard light and making it feel like it's sunny? Do we embrace the clouds? I mean, that's the joy of walking outside with actors and putting it in front of the camera versus being on a stage with an actor in a motion base and a screen behind them, and the planet's supposed to be on fire, and you're like, okay, where is the fire coming from? Is the fire over here? Is it over there? Oh, well, we don't know yet. It's like, all right, well, I'm going to do what I think looks good, and then you can follow my lead later. And that's
Yeah.
more challenging than going and standing in the middle of the road in Texas with Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner and doing a dialogue scene where they're standing next to a 1932 Ford, right?
Yeah.
There's a great joy in the simplicity of that. I mean, it's never simple, but you
No,
go home
no.
at the end of the day and you have it all in the camera.
No, I completely get that, and I totally appreciate. I mean, that's one thing that I love about Tom Cruise's films or even Spielberg films is that the practicality of sets and locations and all that, and
Yeah, I mean, look, Maverick was an incredible experience as a movie.
yeah, it was.
I mean, the fact that they put all those actors in those planes made a huge difference.
That's what made the movie. Period. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's what it was. If anything else, but
I mean, I'm sure the actors probably would have rather been on a motion base because I think a lot of them got sick, but it's certainly, you could see it. And it gave a level of reality that was real. I mean, it was insane.
yeah. I mean, I have to tell you, um I was talking about the shower scene from The Rock with you earlier. Whenever I'm making a film or trying to figure out a scene in post, I will watch certain films like The Godfather being one of them, or I watch Forrest Gump or Schindler's List or Jurassic Park. But for that shower scene, for some reason, I don't know, it got stuck in my head all these years, and I that's what I always think about when I think about The Rock. So I had a feature narrative documentary about a protagonist and followed him through a detention center. And the end sequence, the way I cut it, it has nothing to do with the Rock scene of the shower. But I watched that scene over and over again, and that inspired me to cut that. And in terms of the way the angles of the shots were and the cuts, it was nothing like that. But I just want to let you know that how inspirational that scene
Oh, that's,
was.
well, you should thank Richard for that as well. I mean,
Well, I
one of
did
the
that
things that,
too.
so remember, this was an era also when if you shot something in slow motion, you couldn't bring it back to 24 frames, right?
Right.
Now there's software where if you shoot within a multiple of 24, you can take it back. If you shoot 72 and you go, I want this to be 24. Yes, the shutter angle is slightly different, but you can do that and it's fine. You couldn't do that in 92 or 93 when we were making The Rock. I will say Michael had a great understanding of how to intermix 24 frames, 48, 72, 96, 120. He was incredibly skilled at mixing frame rates within a scene.
Yeah.
And it didn't take you out of the scene, it actually sucked you into it even more.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of directors that have tried to mimic Michael, and they don't even come
No,
remotely close. I mean, there has been a lot of attempts, but it just doesn't work. It's not in their DNA. I mean, Michael's DNA is different than Steven Spielberg's, and
correct.
your DNA is different than Janusz Kaminski. So
Right.
it's 100%. What are you working on now?
I just finished a movie called Grand Death Lotto, and I
Okay,
think it's based on a video game, and it's a movie I did with Paul Feig, and it's my fourth movie with Paul. Paul did Bridesmaids, and Paul and I went to college together, and it's a movie
nice.
with John Cena and Aquafina, and it's kind of a raunchy action movie that I think is going to be really fun. I finished it. Technically, I finished it last week. Granted, the writer's strike happened, but I did
Right.
a couple of days of just doing visual effects plates for the movie. Because we shot some scenes in cars against blue screen, and I had to go out and shoot the exterior plates. So I did that last week, and now I'm technically off, which is nice.
That's good. Paul Feig also did, I think, Freaks and Geek. I think he came around the
Yep,
same time as Judd
yep,
Apatow, right?
yep. He did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
he's
No,
a
that
very, very smart, funny director. And I
is there.
enjoy working with him. He's a lot of fun. He's not the visual stylist that Michael Bay is, but that's okay. It's always fun to, as a cinematographer, stretch yourself in different ways,
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Is there a particular director that you would love to work with that you haven't yet?
Um, Boy, that's a tough question to ask. I mean, yeah, Billy Wilder, but he doesn't exist anymore, right? I mean, of the modern directors, no. I think the ones I work with, I enjoy. I'm always happy to see really good work by other people. I think the Daniels are brilliant, but I don't know if I would be the right guy to shoot a movie for the Daniels. They know exactly what they want and how they're doing it.
Yeah.
I certainly really enjoy Paul and Colin and John Lee Hancock in particular. They're all different directors, but they're all good storytellers. John Lee Hancock and Paul are also both screenwriters, which is and so is Colin actually. So most of the directors I work with are also screenwriters, which is a great advantage when you're on set and everything goes ass over tea kettle because they have the skill to figure out a way out of the problem. And it's a
Right.
great skill, and it's a great relief to know that these people, because sometimes you show up and you're expecting something and maybe the location just didn't work out the way you thought, or the weather's wrong, And when you've got somebody who also wrote the script, they're very adept at rolling with the punches. And as you know, making films, nothing ever goes according to plan.
Never, never
Never,
does.
never does for me. You're always going to plan B,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
or plan C. And I
that is
always, I'm very well prepared. I spend a lot of time how I prep the movie, and I prep it for, obviously, this is the best case scenario. If that doesn't work out, here's another way to go. If that doesn't work out, I don't like this way, but this is one more way to get us out of this problem.
yeah. Adapting is such an important part, and I find it's such a simple thing. But I've seen people, you know, not for wrong reasons, that people will just freak out, like trying to come up with solutions. But unfortunately, there's only one thing to you have to do to move forward, is figure out a solution. Now, it may not be 100% the way you wanted it, but unless you make a decision and you move forward, everybody's going to be just standing there doing nothing.
Right. And I think that Kevin Costner said something to me one day. He said, it was a very interesting line, and I've used it a lot. Kevin said to me one day, he said, coverage makes cowards of us all. And that if you can tell the entire scene in one shot, that's the best way to do it.
Yep.
And he's right. I mean, granted, we still shoot coverage, but I was very moved by, because he obviously, look, he won an Oscar for Best Director for Dances with Wolves. He's a very bright man. And, you know, you listen to him, you know, and I thought it was an interesting, and I think it was because we were like, there was a storm coming in. We're outside, we're in Louisiana, it's the Highwaymen, and we've got a 2-page scene to do, but we're with lightning and everything, we're going to get shut down. And I think John Lee and I said, well, why don't we just have them walk away from us in a 2-shot? We'll be on their backs. Worst case scenario, if you have to change the dialogue, you can do that in post. And but look at this tableau; it's beautiful. And you know, that's what we did. And I remember, and we were like, okay, we got it. And we were all sort of like, you know, okay, there's no coverage. And Kevin said, yeah, well, coverage makes cowards of us all. This is a great way to shoot that scene.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think having limitations on people, and then people finding a way to break those rules and limitations, is the best way when a film makes,
it's the only way to be creative. If you have all the time and money, you're going to screw it up.
No, then you're going to screw up the story. You're going to screw up the story 100%. And you know, one last thing, you've done music videos, you've done commercials, you know, you've done lots of feature film. Ever thought about doing a doc?
I never have. I don't, you know, it's one of those things where I know Roger Deakins started his career doing documentaries, and I will say that I love documentaries, and this streaming has been the greatest thing that ever happened to documentary filmmakers, right? Because now their stuff gets exhibited. And certainly as a member of the Academy, you know, I get every documentary to see, and I may fall behind on feature films, but I never fall behind on documentaries. And I really enjoy them. It's not something I would ever say no to. I just don't know where my skill set is, you know?
Right. Well, the fact that you watch documentaries, and you watch a lot of them, I would be honored if you took some time to watch at least 2 of my films, feature narrative documentary, if you have some time.
Yeah, what are they?
They're not on streaming platforms. They're just, for now, they're on Vimeo on demand, and they're going to get onto some other platforms. One of them is called Citizen of Moria. If you Google Citizen of Moria, Citizen and OFMORIA.
Yeah, I see the poster behind you.
Yeah, and then In Search of My Sister. They're both narrative feature documentaries that I actually directed simultaneously 2 years before COVID and going into COVID, and then spent post during COVID. But I would love we've done so many screenings around the world, US Capitol Hill, Europe Parliament. They're human rights, but they're very central focused. There's an arc on both characters. If you like documentaries, you'll definitely enjoy them.
I will check them out, and I will recommend one. It's called Circle in the Square, The Story of Hypnosis. And it's directed by Anton Corbijn, you know, who did The American and was a huge still photographer and has directed feature films. I don't know where to see it exactly, but it is the story of these two guys in England who were the big record album cover guys. And it's their story, and it's a really fabulous documentary. Or Circling the Square, but it's the story of hypnosis.
Let me just see if I can find it. I've actually sent you the link in the chat to both the films. Squaring the Circle, you mean?
Yeah, Squaring the Circle.
Yeah. Okay, I'll take a look at that. I've sent you the link, but if you want like a private link, I'd be happy to send it to your agent and she can pass it on to you.
Perfect. That would be great.
Great. Listen, John, this has been phenomenal. I don't know how much time you have in the next few months. I would love to chat with you for a couple of more films before you get busy again.
You can always reach out, and if I'm around, I'd be more than happy to chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.